Let's bring in our company, legal analyst and former Clinton advisor, Jami Floyd, editorial page editor for the Washington Examiner, Mark Tapscott, and Comcast Network's D.C. bureau chief, Robert Trainum. Of course, we should mention Comcast is acquiring MSNBC's parent company, NBC Universal. Good to see all of you. Jami, let me start with you since you're here with me. We know the Congress has a lot of battles ahead and a lot of tough choices to make. But when do we need to start hearing some specifics? Because again, you know, it's great to say, oh, we need to cut, we need to balance the budget, we need to, all this stuff, but when do we get down to brass tacks?
Now, no time to waste. And I think respectfully, last week everyone waited in light of the shooting.
Absolutely.
And I think there was really no choice in that with respect to Congresswoman Giffords. But she's on the mend, and I do think she would want them to get right to work. The time is now. There is no time to waste, as we just heard Congresswoman Bass say. And we do have to get down to brass tacks, and they're very, very difficult decisions to be made.
Well, Mark, where do you see maybe the possibility of some agreement? I mean, obviously the Republicans and Democrats rejected Bowles-Simpson. Where do you see some real substantive work getting done?
Well, it's too early to see substantive work being done at the moment, but I think there is some possibility of some cuts in the Pentagon budget that could be agreed upon. Rand Paul, for example, has talked quite extensively about looking at the defense budget, and I think a lot of Republicans agree with him on that point. Beyond that, I think the problem here is going to be anytime people start talking about budget cuts, the immediate response is, well, where are you going to specifically cut? And that automatically raises everybody who has an interest in maintaining a federal program as an opponent to it. My view is, rather than doing specific targeted cuts, they ought to just simply say, everybody gives up 5% and let's go forward.
Let's talk, Robert, a little bit about the vocal opposition, and I'm looking specifically at the Tea Party. New poll numbers out today, Washington Post, ABC. 52% of Americans now hold unfavorable views of the Tea Party, but President Obama's numbers are up. 54% now approve of the job that he is doing as president. Do you see anything in those numbers, Robert? Is the Tea Party influence failing? Does the president have some political capital he can use here?
Yes, the president does have some political capital. There's two pivotal moments that the country is going to look to the president for more leadership. The first one is obviously the State of the Union, which is scheduled for the 25th of this month, which is next Tuesday. The second one really is when the president submits his budget to the Congress. And then the real question becomes, to the other points that were raised a few moments ago, as to where people are going to be okay with some budget cuts. Look, let's talk about where the president, where Republicans agree on. They both agree that the government is too large. They both agree that there needs to be a serious conversation about entitlement reform as it relates to Medicare, as it relates to Social Security. That's where you really have to, unfortunately, make some major cuts in order to get the budget balanced, in order to get this country back on some type of fiscal responsibility. So the real pedal to the metal, if you will, is when Republicans roll up their sleeves and say, okay, Mr. President, we're willing to negotiate on this. And that's when the president needs to say, okay, I see your point on here, and that's exactly where we need to go. Back to your point about the Tea Party. Look, I think Sarah Palin, unfortunately, probably has a lot to do with the Tea Party having a downward slide, if you will, in the polls, given the fact that she made some controversial remarks, if you will, as it relates to her response to the Tucson shooting a couple of days ago.
Mark, do you think she's hurt the Tea Party in general?
I'm sorry, Chris, do I think
Sarah Palin and some of the remarks she's made and the controversy that surrounded her post-Tucson?
I think, I haven't looked at the numbers of it, but I suspect that this ABC Post poll is going to prove to be one of these outliers that come along periodically as public opinion is surveyed over time.
Well, let me just show you the numbers, because obviously this relates to something very specific, but the response to the tragedy in Tucson, 78% approve of the way the president responds to it. And by the way, so do most Republicans. Even the vice president had something, former Vice President Dick Cheney had something positive to say. Only 30% for Sarah Palin.
But the numbers I'm referring to are the sample numbers and the proportions among the various groups, Democrats and Republicans and so forth. And there's some history here with the post-ABC poll of oversampling Democrats. So I'd really like to see those numbers on that.
Well,
part.
but among Republicans, 72% favored the Obama response. And this is a moment in time for President Obama to use that capital in going to the Hill and making those changes that we're all talking about. I do agree that every president has his moment in time, and this was Obama's moment in time. But everyone seems to agree that he used it well and to his advantage, and Palin did not. And it has hurt the Tea Party. It may be time for the Tea Party to distance itself from Palin.
All right, Jamie, Mark, Robert, we're going to talk a lot more about this coming up. Thank you so much. Let's bring back our company, Jami Floyd, Mark Tapscott, Robert Traynham. Robert, you worked with the Vice President Cheney. How do you think he looks?
You know, he looks frail, there's no question about it, but he's still lucid. I mean, he still has something to say and it's still relevant, but it's the obvious. He's lost a lot of weight. But one thing that I noticed throughout that interview, which is still classic Dick Cheney, he's very cerebral, he's very measured in his tones, and he clearly knows exactly what he thinks.
Yeah, one of the things that he insisted he thinks President Obama is going to be a one-term president, Jamie, but he didn't say which candidate he thinks could beat him. Wouldn't say about Sarah Palin. What do you make of that?
Well, very cerebral. I've also met Vice President Cheney on several occasions, and he always was, even in closed-door meetings, very, very cerebral, and always hedges his bets. And he says we'll hear from him as we move forward toward 2012 who he thinks that candidate may be, that he will step into the fray and give us his opinion. But I'm going to lay my bet here that he will not. That he will not give us any indication and will not pass judgment on Sarah Palin.
Really, you know, Mark, he said he's missed the action, and obviously he has to see how his health goes, but this is somebody who, even though he was a polarizing figure, did very well with the base, could raise a lot of money for the Republican Party. Do you think he's going to get back into it?
Well, I have to say, I also was shocked at his physical appearance. He really has lost weight, and I think that's something to be concerned about. Dick Cheney has always been, as has been pointed out, a very careful, prudential sort of political figure, and frankly, I would be amazed if he doesn't become more actively involved in the campaign, just by virtue of the fact that that's what he does. That's what he is.
Involved in policy.
It will be in a measured way, but he will do it.
Involved in policy, perhaps, but I can't imagine him undercutting Palin or anyone else until the party as a whole makes it.
So you don't think he'll make a pre-convention
I
endorsement?
can't imagine.
Well, let me ask you also a little bit about Dick Cheney and his influence on the party. Mark, where do you think it is right now?
I think Dick Cheney is very much one of the respected elders and will continue to be that for all of the reasons that made him a very effective vice president, in my view. And I think he is one of the folks that a lot of us look to for wisdom, if you will, on questions such as, is Sarah Palin really qualified to be president?
Well, it is going to be interesting to see if he weighs in on that. Robert, he also didn't talk about some things, telling Jamie he's holding some stuff back for the book he's writing, his memoirs. What are you dying to know?
I think what I'm dying to know is what he really thinks. What does he really think of Sarah Palin, as Jamie asked the question? Who does he think can beat Barack Obama in 2012? Look, he already alluded to the fact that he thinks that President Obama is a one-term president. There's really no news there in terms of what the vice president thinks. But you know, Chris, what's also interesting about Dick Cheney is that he's a former vice president that we're still talking about. When's the last time Dan Quayle was in the national news? When's the last time, Walter Mondale was in the news? So, Dick Cheney is interesting on two fronts. Number one, he still wades into policy and the politics, but also, too, not only just him, but his family. I mean, remember, he has got two daughters, right. One of which is a national correspondent. The other person wades into national politics. Most recently, Vice President Cheney hosted a fundraiser for Maria Sino, who obviously ran for the RNC chair. So, what's interesting here is that we're talking about Vice President Cheney 2 years after the fact.
Yeah. Robert Traynham, Mark Tapscott, Jami Floyd, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
He's now retired almost as often as Barbara Streisand, but it does look like Brett Favre might actually be serious this time. According to an NFL spokesman, Favre officially filed retirement papers with the league on Monday. And on his website, there's an email blast to fans advertising, quote, a thanks for the memories poster. It shows Favre in Packers, Vikings, and Jets uniforms. The autograph version will set you back a cool $300. And you've got to see this video. It's gotten more than 1 million hits on YouTube. Look. Wow. The dangers of texting while driving, we know, but while walking, right head first into the fountain at the local mall. She'd just been strolling along in Pennsylvania's Berkshire Mall looking at her cell phone. She says the fountain jumped out in front of her. All right, let's talk about this with our company, who certainly have never done that. Jami Floyd, Mark Tapscott, Robert Traynham. I have to admit, Jami, I'm going to fess up.
Jumped right out.
I've been walking. I have walked down the streets of New York City, and out of nowhere, a pole will appear.
But no video tape.
You know, those prayers every night are paying off in a big way. Maybe there should be a law.
There ought to be a law.
Walking and texting,
there ought to
right?
be a law. You know, it's dangerous. I mean, look.
Mark, have you ever done this?
No, I haven't.
Not falling into a mall fountain, I'm saying, but walking and texting. Are you guilty? Come on, you live in Washington. Everyone does it.
Well, you know what happened if the camera had kept rolling and we could see just after she fell in? 3 trial lawyers came rushing up to hand her their card.
Oh my gosh, Robert, what do you think? You ever been guilty of this?
Well, I can relate to that. I have a funny story. It involves a mall. Over the weekend, I was in the mall. You know how sometimes they have those glass walls, if you will, going into a store. And I don't know if I can say this on national television, but I was in the Apple store and I was leaving and I was texting my better half saying, "Okay, I'm done. I'm going to meet you at the other store." And lo and behold, I was texting and I walked right into the wall.
Oh no!
And so obviously it was a retail store, so I'm sure there's maybe footage of me somewhere.
But there's a large
Apple. Wait a minute, you're right. Somewhere there is surveillance video of that, and I just want Apple to know
it was your fault.
We would give.
But it did raise a painful reminder to me, and that is, look, you have to pay attention to your surroundings, because fortunately I ran into a wall and obviously I didn't hurt anyone. But what if that was a person that was disabled? What if that was someone that whatever the case may be? So it's just a painful reminder that we need to be cognizant of our surroundings and do a better job of not focusing on us, but on focusing on other people.
And because we like to lean forward here at MSNBC, and because I like to always leave people better informed than when they came in the Urban Dictionary, do you know what you call this? Either a textrian, a pedextrian, or I particularly like this one, a text zombie.
All I keep thinking
what
is
about just klutz?
All I keep thinking is this poor woman's phone got wet.
And what would you do if something happened to your phone?
That's all I keep thinking.
Life as we know it ends. Your good sports, Jami Floyd, Mark Tapscott, and Robert Traynham. Thank you so much.